be done now, and we were thinking that computer auditing was something that should only last a little while. You know, we were even discussing in the old Iiasa days, before it was even called Iiasa, that we should try to remove this idea of computer auditing because it's created yet another little silo and a presumption that no one else can handle computers. So I believe that, you know, everyone can handle computers, everyone can handle technology, provided you don't fear it. And in fact, it's better not to be technical when you're doing an audit of an IT-related system. It's all about asking the right questions. I mean, the way Titch presented cybersecurity, you know, those questions, we whizzed through them, but if you were to ask those questions, you would uncover nearly all of the issues to do with cybersecurity. But if you were a technician, you would probably end up having a lengthy discussion about one particular technical aspect of protecting computer systems and ignore all those other things which are actually far, far more important. And, you know, did you know that I Googled yesterday, I was really curious, so I Googled what's the literal meaning of auditor? I bet you don't know. It actually means, the exact literal translation, there's a clue in the first few letters, which is aud, which is to do with listening and hearing. It actually means to hear and listen. And I think, you know, when I was doing auditing 40 years ago, and it was in a company that took it very, very seriously, and we were actually, people in internal audit were mostly moved from within the company as a stepping stone to senior management. I was taken out of the EDP department, as it was called then, to be the lead computer auditor, and as a career move, and most of the people I audited had been in internal audit, so it made the job of internal audit far, far better. And the whole idea was to have a discussion and a collaboration and arrive together at things that would improve the business's performance, and if there was something critically bad, to agree to deal with it together. And I was personally measured by how many things did I not pick up, but also how many things did I add value. And that was on my personal scorecard, and that was 40 years ago. And so I would encourage all of you to, and I was also, the first thing I did when I was made the computer auditor was to train everyone in the internal audit department in handling computers. And even 40 years ago, trained everyone. I remember doing this in Houston, in Texas, training everyone to do an interrogation with the old audit software that we had then. So please don't, you know, feel like you can't handle technology. The other little thing I thought of the other day was when we were talking about this business of moving from trusted advisor to strategic advisor. And I bet some of you will think, well, maybe I'm not experienced enough to be strategic. Maybe I'm not experienced enough to talk to the very senior people. I came out with another expression, which is to be an innovative advisor, which, funny enough, ties into IA. And I'm wondering one day whether we might even call ourselves innovative advisors as opposed to internal auditors, because the other thing that was pressed on me 40 years ago was not to just come up with recommendations or suggestions which come out of a book or a checklist or traditional things like Titch was saying, you know, have a disaster recovery plan because you haven't got one, but to discuss with the people you're communicating with, the client, how could we do this differently? And to try and open up a whole new dimension of innovative thinking to add some value. Anyway, there's just a few thoughts I thought I'd just share before I actually get into this. So I was asked originally to do a session on business relationships, and I added in technology because really this could have been titled, you know, the impact of the connected world on internal audit, because we all know now that everything is connected, and I'm going to show a few slides in a second just to try and share my view of that. And technology has made this unbelievably connected. But, you know, as the previous speaker mentioned and some other speakers during the week have mentioned, you know, technology is just an enabler. It's just a cost, actually, if you do nothing useful with it. And it's the outcome of the technology that matters. the business need, the business purpose. And in this connected world, technology has created a whole new environment. Let me get on to the first slide here. I'm pressing the green button. There we go. And these words have been used a lot during the week, at least the sessions I've been attending. And, some of this is because of technology, things like data security, but some of it is because of the social implications and the way people have changed and the human side of our environment has shifted. And I think, we've come up with, as Carolyn was explaining, I work very closely with Carolyn and the Good Governance Academy, and younger people, are not willing to accept the way some things are done nowadays, the lack of ethics, the lack of care about the environment, not considering their future and their next generation's future. So the environment we're dealing with is a mixture of technology challenges, but I think also social and human challenges. And it's a very important part of an audit process, helping our organizations to perform not just well, but also ethically and properly and fairly and so forth. So I would say just bear that in mind. So what I'm trying to lead into is when we're doing our audit planning and our audit prioritization, and even when we're thinking about our recommendations and our suggestions, that we think about the environment that we're actually operating in, both from a technical perspective, from a connectivity perspective in a connected world, and also from a social human perspective. And business relationships, it started, I suppose, for me originally with the BRM Institute that I'm connected to, in the IT to business sort of environment where we all know there's a hopeless disconnect. But I don't want to talk too much about that. I want to talk more about relationships in a connected world and how that affects even the scope of an audit. Because the ecosystem that every organization exists in is now a connection between a lot of business relationships, business partners. We use, a bank, it must be thousands of connections, ranging from technology service providers, business partners, and of course, our customers are connected directly with us now. In some organizations, it will be driven by joint ventures, by alliances, and the technology infrastructure, there's been a lot of discussion about the challenge of infrastructure in the public sector here, the cost of how do we pay for all these things and keep current. But we're moving more and more away from having infrastructure that we own to infrastructure that we rent, more and more towards beyond the cloud into situations where we hopefully rely on other people to keep current and provide us with the latest technology. But where does that put us from an audit perspective? We need to make sure that those relationships are done well. And so from a risk point of view, we're worrying maybe about the reliability, the security, and the performance, like the CrowdStrike episode of a third party. But from an improvement and opportunity point of view, we could also be discussing with our audit clients how we could change things for the future to make it better opportunity-wise, not from just a risk point of view. So going back again to my original career 40 years ago, we were mostly driven by driving performance. And risk was considered a part of preventing performance. So, not obsessed with risk, but making sure we were considering risk as a way to jeopardize performance. But performance is the goal. So I would just say that considering the environment that we have, as our audit approach evolves, we should be looking into not just the risks of those connections and those relationships, but also the opportunities and help our audit clients to improve the way they do things through improving those relationships. In the public sector, there has to be a shift more and more towards outsourcing and sharing the outsourcing. I mean, that could be a topic for an hour on its own. But equally, and look, and I've been involved sometimes with public sector clients where the provider didn't know who I was, and sadly we have to manage some of these providers very, very carefully. Otherwise, they take the public sector to the cleaners, to be honest. So from a audit scoping point of view, we've got to, I think, collaborate in a way that's different. And I can't say in my past experience I ever had that real challenge, but I would say that now, internally, we need to, if we're, talking to, I don't know, put yourself in the position of talking to the IT department. It's not just the IT department, it's also all the other departments, and try to bring those elements together, because sadly we still suffer quite a bit of siloed thinking and people only thinking in their particular area. But the combination of HR, compliance, even our sales functions, and even our marketing functions, because all of this affects customers, affects brand. I just believe, and I can foresee, that in the future the scope of interaction internally will be much wider and much broader, but more importantly, more collective. And so the universe, or the audit scope, is up for challenge. So just something to make you think, perhaps. So I'm going to talk about risks for a minute, and then opportunities. There's definitely, look, I could have even more on this slide, obviously, because, and you've heard, no doubt, in all the sessions you've been to, there's lots and lots of risks. But as someone said yesterday, I can't remember who it was, that you have to take a risk to make progress, and it's about taking the right risks and making sure that the risks that are most likely to be worrisome are protected and controlled effectively. But the risks are shifting. And in a connected world, it's not just in your own environment. And I think it was Carolyn or someone said this morning that if we talk about the environment, do we have anyone in our internal audit function that can handle discussing the environment? Historically, we've been, financially oriented, but the range of issues, the range of topics that we need to cover are much broader. I think if we don't keep a team of mixed skills, we're likely to miss a lot of risk topics that hitherto were never thought to be part of our audit scope. There's also lots of new opportunities. Digital transformation is one in particular I've given a lot of thought to, because it's become the latest sort of buzzword, and I think someone mentioned before, my whole passion nowadays is education and driving educational thinking for leaders with new technologies. And digital transformations are business changes. This is another if you think about technology now from an internal audit point of view, everything actually is just technically enabled, but it's a business change that's actually happening all of the time. And the management of a digital transformation is really the management of a business change. And it's not the technology that we're mostly focused upon, it's what we want the technology to help us to do. And I think all of you could handle helping to drive good digital transformations by being part of the digital transformation as an observer and as a proactive advisor even, driving it more and more as business-led change as opposed to technology-led change. I mean, one of the things I've been going on for years is, why are technology-enabled projects always called by the system that we've used? Like we're doing an SAP project as opposed to what the business outcome is that we want to improve, like better customer service or improving the supply chain. So I believe there's never been actually a better time for internal audit to be able to add value by not just showing that they are aware of risks that are happening now and likely to happen in the future, but also the opportunities that lie in front of us that we could help proactively move forward to be successful. Because unfortunately still with technology, probably 3 out of 4 investments in technology-driven business change don't actually succeed and actually can cost a fortune when it goes wrong. So audit planning. And I say I did these slides a month ago. I had no idea what I was going to come and listen to here, but some of these things were popping up in a lot of the sessions that I've attended. And there's a quote there that I got from McKinsey's, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, which is about agility. There's been a lot of talk about agile, especially amongst IT people, agile methodologies, and scrumming and all kinds of things. Agility is not the same as agile. Agility is this ability to quickly adapt and quickly change. And when we're talking about planning, no one's ever had a plan that happened, the way you planned it. I mean, it's guaranteed. You can't foresee everything. There will always be unknowns. There will always be things you hadn't even thought of in your planning process. So planning, in my mind, is never-ending. It's continual. It's sort of iterative. But it requires an ability to accept change very, very quickly. So from an audit planning point of view, and if I think back, this was not the case 40 years ago. When I think back 40 years ago, we had our annual audit plan. We divided up, the audits. We scheduled them, and we had predefined, I wouldn't call them checklists, but topics to cover, and we went through those from one to the next. I wonder now how possible that really is, because what we're dealing with is moving so fast. And if we're going to add value with our clients, we have to keep pace with what they're actually facing for themselves, and even be one step ahead of them if we can, as I'll come on to. So I would argue that audit planning is continual. It needs to be very, very adaptive and very, very agile. And I think we as individuals need to be willing to accept that we have to move and change fast. So moving to a different topic, providing insight in this environment. And I took some stuff out of the actual IIA material here. And we've heard words like insight and foresight. It's funny, I've now in my latter years, I've sort of become frustrated sometimes with some of these fancy words, because whilst I agree it should be insight and foresight, it can sound like the latest fancy word, I came down to the thinking that, and there's 3 words in green on the bottom here, for me are much more sort of easy to understand and easy to apply. The number 1 for me would be always be proactive. In other words, be one step ahead if you can. And, in having the conversation with clients and asking questions, which I mentioned just before I started, that you can, even in a so-called high-tech world, you can ask questions without having to make them technical, and I would say it's much better to do that anyway. A lesson I learnt years ago was ask open questions. Don't say, have you got an audit plan? Have you got a security plan? You say, so can you explain to me how your security plan is working? Or can you explain to me how this project is being managed? Or can you explain to me so-and-so? And then can you explain to me or tell me what you find is going wrong? One of the other thing I just wanted to mention while I'm on this topic is something that happened to me 40 years ago. I don't think this has happened anywhere else. I was very, very lucky to, as I say, be put into an internal audit team that was really, really good quality. And the the chief internal auditor at the time was a man called O.J. McGill. I'll never forget him because he was quite an inspiration. And we had a conference every year where we would all meet somewhere globally. And in this meeting, he was just talking to us all, and he said, look, I've been looking at the last few years' audit reports, and this is a common complaint that he pointed out. He said, look, I forget what percentage he said. It might have been 20% of the so-called findings are the same as the previous year, even some the same as 2 years ago. You know, the dreaded repeated audit finding. And he said, the problem is we're clearly not explaining our recommendations properly or getting any kind of buy-in to what we are trying to get done, because the measure of internal audit's performance as a group was in those days measured by the amount of directly correlated business improvements that could be tied back to internal audit interventions. So he said, I'll tell you what, everyone is going on a sales training class for 3 days, which I did. And I'll briefly, I haven't got the time to go in detail of this, but the brief point, the main point of the sales training was not to tell your auditee what your finding is, not even tell the auditee what the recommendation is, but to maneuver your audit client to explain what he would like to have done. So it's like when you sell something, you don't show what you want to sell. You get the person to ask for what you have in your back pocket. And so knowing what the person should be trying to do and what the organization should be trying to improve, you maneuver the audit client or help him to be able to explain what he thinks the problem is and what he would like to see done. Then say, well, look, that's exactly what I thought we should do. Why don't we together put this thought together on paper so it becomes a shared finding and recommendation. By the way, years later, when I worked for Arthur Andersen, we decided to scrap the word finding because it's a really negative word. It points fingers. And so finding was replaced always with opportunity as a word. And of course we want to add value, and the only way to add value is to come up with something that our audit clients feel is a real improvement and a real benefit. And if they buy into it, then it's something they would own and can feel proud of. I've already talked about agility. So I think, I argue that the internal audit strategy is a continual process. I don't think that you could say a strategic plan is fixed. Those days, if ever they existed, I believe are gone. I might be arguing now with some other people's views on that, but that's my view. And I think, we can bring people together. This collaborative way of thinking, is the new norm almost amongst people in general. The better together. The slogans have come up. A lot of it came out of COVID. And so I think if we, from a soft skills perspective and a human perspective, act as the go-between, this is the BRM way of thinking, is that we are the facilitating person who helps bring people together, almost like a marriage guidance counselor in the worst case, And so internal auditors can behave in a different manner, can just go about their work differently. It does require more social skills, but I think most of the people I meet nowadays, and it's interesting, they're mostly women, which is also good. Women seem to have a better ability to socially connect, I find, and are not playing a power game. It's a softer way of getting things moving forward. So I think it's that kind of shift that we need. And I won't go through that list. I mean, you're going to get, obviously, all these slides. But there are lots of things that we can do in the connected world, even with third parties directly. We talk about doing third-party audits. It's almost like we're going to check our third parties out. If our organization works with those companies or those people as business partners, why can't we partner up on doing the audit? We could even share the audit work. They would have the same issue from their side. How often do we do that? And by the way, this providing insight and providing advice, this was another topic that came out a lot, I think, on the first day, this balance between assurance and advice. Again, 40 years ago, the thinking was that the more advice you give, the easier the assurance ought to be. And in fact, we could get to the point where the insurance is almost a quick check, because we've now improved things so much that not only is it working better, but our audit client is assessing for himself and driving his own monitoring properly. And so the insurance process becomes less painful, more efficient, and there are far and far fewer issues that we're actually finding. So it's an investment in future, easier assurance. And certainly internal auditors are, it's also been mentioned many times, have the advantage of being objective and independent. We're not caught up in the politics. We shouldn't be caught up in the politics. We're not caught up in personal, difficult scenarios where we daren't speak out against our boss. We can stand, and we're not caught up in not seeing the wood for the trees. So as an independent, objective people, we should be able to stand back and point people in the right direction, but do it together in the long run to avoid tick box and assurance efforts that become a pain. So, again, I'm not going to go through this too much. I just want to pick on a couple of things. I think, governance is a topic very close to me. I get worried that governance gets misspoken, misunderstood. In the worst case, it's seen as a tick box compliance thing. I hated that GRC acronym. I thought this is make governance sound like it's only risk and compliance. It's complete opposite. Governance is value creation, with risk meaning protect that value creation, and compliance meaning we'll simply do the right things where there are regulatory or contractual requirements. And in my education work, I replace governance with simply doing things right. And so I think, again, if we as internal auditors avoid the jargon, avoid the complex language, because, the people we talk to are not going to speak these terms every single day. And I don't know if we still use words like general controls and application controls. We've invented our own speak too, which makes it very difficult to communicate. So I would argue, just talk business language all of the time, understand the business as best you possibly can, and work in a kind of partnering culture mentality. We're partners to the business, encourage our business people to be partners with their other relationships, and there could be opportunities to partner up with other organizations to prove that everything's working smoothly. I think Titch made that point about having the right to audit. That's a really negative way of trying to arrange with a business partner that we want to both operate safely. Wouldn't it be much better to say, could we have a shared audit approach? Just a thought. So I'm coming to the end, I think, a bit here. In fact, this probably is my last slide, I think, from memory. So, look, I don't think there's ever been a better time to actually have a more exciting internal audit career. I would recommend if you're not doing this already, trying to bring people in from the business to internal audit and describe it as a stepping stone to more senior level. That will give also people who've come into internal audit from outside the realization that this could be a way to advance upwards. It's the best way to see the whole business from an objective perspective, and to learn and understand about how all these business functions work, and to give everyone at least an insight into the basics of good control thinking, good risk management thinking, good governance thinking, without having to learn that in a painful way by being an auditee. So I hope that, rounds out today and As I say, I had no idea I was going to have to be the last one to speak, but I hope that's left a few positive thoughts for you and maybe inspired a few challenging things to think about too. I think that's where I'm done. Yeah, there we go.
Mr. Gary Hardy, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for that.
Cool, it's very bright here. I should have put sunglasses
extremely, extremely bright.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into our question and answer session. Do we have any questions that are coming from the floor? I don't have any questions that came from our online delegates. I'm not sure if any have popped up so far. Oh, in fact, we do.
Oh.
The first question says, are the internal auditors mentally prepared for all these changes? Can we confidently say we can identify and recommend on cyber risks?
So mentally prepared. Look, I would hope if you take on the job of internal audit, you are not the type of person to be fearful, or scared. I mean, it won't work. I don't think there's any need to be worried. It's the ability to accept that change is happening all the time. We're doing it every day now. Everyone's affected by change. Look, and people who know me know that I'm one of these people who believe change is the best thing ever. I mean, look, I would never, but 20 years ago, as it was mentioned in my introduction, we moved as a family to Cape Town. Actually, the bit that happened before that wasn't in my introduction, was that the Arthur Andersen firm collapsed. And I got my voicemail, and I was 50-something. And I had one daughter at university, another daughter studying, and I was thinking, this is going to be difficult. Now, I was driving down the road from my house when I got my message saying, report to room, whatever it was, at 10 a.m. in the morning for your exit interview. You're out.
Sure.
And by the time that Arthur Andersen collapse finally happened, it was the worst conditions, So originally, Arthur Andersen said, don't worry, we're the best firm in the world. We're all, financially strong. Everyone will be fine. Blah blah blah. When it came to the crunch, it was the statutory minimum. You got the absolute minimum payoff, and you were gone. And we took a decision. I think the Iraq War was going on as well, and it was November, I think, and it was probably pouring with rain in England. And it was miserable, and somehow I persuaded my family to say, right, that's it. We're going to start again, and we're going to go to Cape Town. Yeah. And the rest is history. And then I made another decision 12 years ago. So my daughter got married. One of my daughters got married to a husband, and we had the wedding in Cape Town. And I said, would you be willing to give up your jobs and come and work with me? That was a hell of a risk to take, but it's worked perfectly. They now live here. I've got 2 grandsons here. So I think, if you're doing internal audit work and you're not a risk taker, if you're one of these negative types, that will rub off on everyone around you. And you'll be seen as someone who is just slowing things down, putting blocks in the way. So I think internal auditors should be agents for change and facilitators of change. So I wouldn't fear that at all. And when you go back to these technical topics, trust me, it's better not to be a technician. It's better to ask open, business-like questions to uncover the real thing. 90% of the problems in technology and the problems with even cybersecurity are nothing to do with technology. It's soft things, it's stupid mistakes, it's bad management. So, yeah, that would be my answer to that.
All right. Any more questions from the floor? Yes, we do. We have 2 questions, actually, from the floor.
Cool.
Afternoon. I just have a question. With your experience, can you maybe share some insights on how you built relationships with business when I think in today's day and age, they're still quite, I don't think they fully understand the function of internal audit in organizations. So sometimes when we go in to actually do our audit reviews, I think they still look at it as a tick box exercise rather than a valuable function that is actually needed within the organization. So I think just with your years of experience, since we were highlighting business relationships, if you can just share some insights with us on how we can improve that through the business relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and most of this came out of my connection with this BRM Institute. So I would not think of anything about, the technical side of audit or anything like that. It's all to do with how you interact as a person. Okay, and so in 1 hour, you could have an interaction with a member of the business that could transform the entire way in which that person perceives you, more than the role of internal audit, or trying to explain. It's not necessary to explain the internal audit role, it's more how you go about what you do. So the lesson that was learnt was, first of all, a lot of emotional intelligence. So which means being very empathetic. And you will come across all kinds of people. Some will be people you think are a real pain, Some are people that you might think are very easy to deal with, but you've got to be able to appreciate their way of operating. And sometimes people who are real pain is because they're actually fearful of themselves. They're, become aggressive because they're actually worried, or they've got an issue they can't handle. The other part is to do a lot of homework beforehand. So when you're asking questions, the person thinks, that person really cared about me and my scenario and my situation. So the homework is not just about knowing the business, it's about knowing that person's position in the business, what he is, challenged with, even by asking other people to find out. So when you go and meet the person, you're having a conversation which shows that you cared about him and or her scenario. And you say, look, my job is simply I would turn internal, you just tell it what it actually is in plain language, which is, my job is I've been given the job to help you uncover the things that are stopping you performing well, and together I can help you, try to fix that. We may not fix everything today, but or tomorrow, but that's my mission. And I wouldn't even say I'm internal audit, because they don't know what internal audit is. And it's like governance. You start saying what governance is, and then you get into an argument about governance. So I think it's all about interpersonal connection, and everyone here should go on emotional intelligence training. It really helps.
More than just getting that artificial intelligence training, it's more the emotional intelligence training. Okay, our last question is coming from the table right at the back.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much, Gary, for the insightful presentation. My name is Emma Paloy from Joburg Water. And my question this afternoon is, how can public sector can quickly move to empower internal resources to do more of understanding cybersecurity, AI in performing their internal audit activities. And the reason why I'm asking this is that outsourcing is good, but I've noted that third parties could be the weakest link to the business network infrastructure. And as you indicated earlier on, third parties are in a hurry when they come to do work in the business, and they don't have time to understand the organization policies and procedures. But I guess internal resource has an insightful knowledge of what the policies in the organizations are. Thank you very much.
Yeah, look, I would repeat again. So first of all, obviously in the public sector, you've got the combination of always a pressure of not enough resource, and I think a mental attitude of feeling somehow inferior. It's a real shame. I think, the public sector get tarred with this brush of being not as smart or as sharp or whatever as the so-called private sector. I can tell you, when I first came to this country, by the way, and everyone was saying to me, you'll never, this is when I was doing a lot more consulting than I do now, that you'll never do work in the public sector, because of my color, because of my age, etc. But I've done a lot of work in the public sector in most of the provinces, also for the Reserve Bank. And like I said before, to deal with cybersecurity or third parties or these technically sharp so-called service providers, you don't want to be on even attempt to be on the same level as them technically, but have the common sense and good questioning ability to ask questions in a way that makes them explain, and have the, this is the skill of the skill of directors, the skill of very senior people, is to ask the right questions and know when the answer doesn't sound right, and be willing to probe and press, And so you can go about that work, I think, in the public sector very, very well. Public sector people, I find, have much more sincerity in the job than you often find in the private sector, because a lot of them have gone into the public. I hope you're one of these people. Have gone into the public sector because they want to serve the public, and it's a different mind, So don't be fearful. I could go on a bit longer, but that would be my message. You don't have to be highly skilled in something technical. What you need to be is highly able to ask good questions, know when the answers don't make sense, and when necessary, if you feel something isn't right, then escalate it. But if you come over well, hopefully you'll get a good response. And you might even get, and I think the service providers are shifting and becoming more aware that they have to be trusted, because we've seen too many bad examples. So I hope that helps, wherever you are, I can't see.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, well-renowned IT guru, Mr. Gary Hardy. Thank you so much for your time and for being with us. Let's do a quick picture moment. And thank you for closing the conference for us.
Cool.
All right. Thank you very much. A round of applause one more time, ladies and gentlemen. Let's help you with that. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our 2024 conference. And as I promised, I did say we're going to have a bit of fun now in the end, just before we let you go into your respective organizations and impart all of this knowledge and all the skills that you have taken from this 3-day conference that you've attended. So I'd like for us just to play a bit of music while we get all the prizes and the fun stuff on stage, and then from then we'll be able to do our closing and then let you go. So if the ladies could just assist in ensuring that we get all the goodies up on stage, and then we'll take it from there.